Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. From Middlebury, Vermont to Tokyo, Japan, today my guest has had quite the journey, and their story is really fascinating to me because, as all the stories are on this show, I guess, but particularly fascinating for me when I look at his story and I look at how it began, and it began in high school. I think about where I was in high school, and my guest today has been brewing alcohol for a good part of their life, and they started off as a home brewer in high school. Now, usually, we're all being told, at least since the 80s, at least, probably further back, but since the 80s, that's what I know, from Nancy Reagan to whoever, telling you just say no and don't drink and drive and all that stuff. And, that's what gets programmed into your head. So, first of all, the last thing I'm thinking of is drinking a whole lot of alcohol before I'm 21, let alone brewing it. And the fact that Christopher Pellegrini of Honkaku, which I probably botched. No, he's shaking his head. I guess I did half decent. So Honkaku spirits, and I'll let him clear all that up later. I told him I'd let him do most of those pronunciations, but Christopher Pellegrini has had quite a journey as an entrepreneur brewing alcohol, and he today is into Japanese spirits. He's a speaker, author, and brewer. He's even been an actor. He's a huge baseball fan, and I can't wait to talk about Christopher's journey. Welcome to Mark My Words. How you doing today?
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. I'm doing great. It's currently a little after 10 p.m. here in Tokyo, Japan. It's the middle of rainy season, so it's quite soupy, but otherwise no complaints. I'm a night owl anyway, so I love this hour of the day.
And we have the soupy rainy season in common as well because it's rainy here. Well, I mean, not currently. Currently, it's beautiful, and I can't wait to go outside later. It's 9 a.m. here. This is not something I usually do, but your story is just incredible, and I, can't wait to really dig in and learn more about it and hear how you got here. Because how you got here and how you started is already pretty amazing. I always get really extra impressed with people who find their passion that early in life. Because for me, it's like, okay, I kind of knew what I wanted to do with my life and what I wanted to major in college, but I wasn't like, well, I'm gonna, do this. I'm gonna like create my own thing. I'm gonna start business and hit the ground. Like, I wasn't thinking like that at all. So let's start first of all with how did your passion for brewing alcohol, especially at that early of an age, how did that come about?
Um, Through school, honestly, it was it was just happenstance. I was in a U.S. history class in high school, and the task that we were given was to create a period appropriate newspaper from a decade that we were assigned. Now, we happened to be assigned the decade of Prohibition. And this is, of course, a time over 100 years ago in America where it was illegal. The sale of alcohol, beverage alcohol, was illegal, and all sorts of shenanigans ensued. So one of my very close friends to this day, Jesse, and I went to Middlebury College, and we went through their microfiche. We went through all of these old basically they'd been photographed and put on microfiche, and we were using the little microscope thing to look at these tiny, expand these tiny historical documents that had been put to film. And we saw all of these amazing ads from 100 years ago, and we saw all of these just articles about all the things that were happening at that time. So we had to understand the decade and create a newspaper from that time. And it was all about rum running, quite honestly. There was so much written about bathtub gin and illicit alcohol production and speakeasies and all of this stuff. And very quickly, Jesse and I were like, you know what? Why don't we take a break from studying the decade and figure out how all of these people were making alcohol at home? So we diverted our energy to figuring out how to homebrew, which turns out isn't that hard. The trick is to simply keep everything immaculate and to be patient and careful, but mostly just clean. And so we started homebrewing. We got a homebrewing kit. We had a little bit of help sourcing stuff, and this had to be a secret, of course, because our parents weren't going to be very impressed if they found out. So we did this for a while, and it got bigger and it got better. You know what? This is hilarious, Mark. I just found this. I'm going to walk off camera for 2 seconds. I just found, I brought it to Japan with me, my old notebook where I wrote my recipes. And so
Wow.
Jesse and I experimented for a long time, and we settled on our first and most popular brand was called Tingler Ale. And it was just a very light, refreshing ale that you could drink for a while. And we got so good at it that we made our own labels. And we had bottles. We would basically pay the deposit on really, really heavy bar bottles from the local bar, bring them home, sterilize them, and use those to bottle our beer. And we had 3 brands by the end of it. By the time that I got busted by my parents and got put out of business, essentially, we had 3 pretty popular brands that we were making consistently. And it was just, of course, I was devastated when my parents were told me I couldn't do it anymore. But it had awoken in me, and this is when I was a teenager, something that was crystal clear to me at the time. Number one, I think it's pretty cool to make something with your hands. Number two, I think it's exceptional if you can make something with your hands that other people will line up to buy. And number three, it's even better if it's really hard to do well. So that started this lifelong fascination with small batch handmade drinks, particularly. I flirted with going to to culinary arts school to get into making food. Somehow avoided that and ended up going into literature and other things that I haven't really used since. But the good thing is that I eventually took what I had learned from homebrewing and converted that into an apprenticeship at the local microbrewery. Later, we lost a couple of people from our brewing team, and I became the youngest commercial brewer in the United States. I was too young to legally drink what I was making at the time. But, here is a 17-year-old doing something that they already knew they loved and doing it at a level where now folks were coming into the brewery and looking through the glass at all of the equipment and looking up at the tower, and there's, how old is that guy? and and the brewer was like, he's been here for a while. And I had been, but I was still underage, and that was not a question they really wanted to answer. Legally I could make it, I just could not sell it or drink it, to laws I had broken previously. Statute of limitations were fine, but that was a seminal experience for me. That is something that really altered the course of my life, because no matter what I did moving forward, no matter what chances I took, I ended up just always sort of gravitating back towards small batch handmade drinks. So that's
So
how I got into it.
that, first of all, that's an incredible story. Secondly, at what point did the light bulb go off? Because you were shut down for a while. At what point did you say, wait a minute, this is not just something that I'm doing out of educational curiosity. I think this is something that could be more, could be a career. I mean, when did you get to the point where you were like, hey, I mean, not that a lot of people were thinking about being entrepreneurs on a large scale back in those days, but when did the light bulb turn on that you were like, wait a minute, this I have something here?
I was very hyper focused on beer for a long time, all throughout college and beyond. And there was a long time when I thought that I really was going to open my own beer brew pub at some point, brew the beer and sell it on premise. And that really is, it's actually a goal that I still sort of have in the back of my cerebrum there, where someday I probably will take a crack at it. But I think what happened was locally in Middlebury, Vermont. I'm actually from Bristol, Vermont, but Middlebury is where the brewery, Otter Creek Brewing, was established. And it was established by a guy who's a couple decades older than me, but who followed a similar path. He started home brewing and turned it into a very, very successful microbrewery back in the 90s. And I stumbled upon that when I was in high school, and they were looking for apprentices. And I had just gotten busted by my parents and grounded like no kid has ever been grounded in their entire life. And I was looking for an opportunity to learn how to do it professionally, how to do it at a larger scale. And so I just drove myself over there and walked into his office, and I said, I want a shot at this. And he said, aren't you college track kid? And I was like, yeah, but that shouldn't matter. He's like, we're kind of looking for somebody who's really gonna want to get dirty here. I'm like, you got me. I'm here for it. And so that was, they gave me a shot at it. They actually had a couple of apprentices. One was a little bit more full time than I was, because I was still going to school at the time. And it became very clear to me pretty early on that this was something that there were multiple opportunities here if I chose to pursue them. And I ended up in Ohio for undergrad, and of course, I had a nice bar in the home that I shared with a couple of my college friends, and we had, I was the only one who had a proper bar in the house that we shared, and I was very focused on it. I nearly started homebrewing again. Long story short, I ended up following a girl to Japan, and when I landed in Japan, I had no idea about Japanese spirits at that point. I was still a beer guy. And I started looking around, and I ran face first into Japan's indigenous spirits. And I became infatuated with them because they were kind of like the craft beer of spirits. They're so diverse. There's so much going on there that nobody's ever heard about. And I fell head over heels in love with them. And that was back in 2003. And I've been here ever since. The girl that I followed to Japan and I did eventually got married. We are sharing our lives together here in Western Tokyo. And at some point along the way, as I kept on moving further and further down this rabbit hole of Japanese indigenous spirits, I guess, and this is a relatively recent development, but there became a point where I had to make a choice. I was either going to do it on the side as a side hustle and try and work that in, help have it fit into the gaps in my life, or I was going to jump. And I eventually jumped. So
Wow.
that's what we're doing now.
That really fills in the gap on something I was about to ask because you obviously majored in Spanish, you wound up over in Japan, so that kind of fills in the gap there. But have you always had a fascination with like languages and cultures and things like that?
Absolutely. Both of my parents met when they were both working overseas, which is fun. A girl from Ohio and a guy from Long Island, and they met in Europe and moved back to America and started a family in Vermont. So I think it was in my DNA in a sense. I studied Spanish and French in high school, and then I added German in college. So by the time I was done with university, I had studied 3 European languages to a pretty significant extent. I then ended up in Korea, sort of on a whim, taught myself Korean, met a girl over there who wanted to move to Japan, followed her to Japan, and now I speak Japanese. So I've always been very into. I'm a I I love situations where I'm a fish out of water. I think they're hilarious. And I'm very good at adjusting, adapting, and also just being okay with not knowing what's going on. And it's just fun. And so I learned long ago that one of the quickest ways to figure things out, of course, is to latch onto the language. And so my brain automatically goes there and starts trying to decipher and pick up on commonalities and copy people's intonation and their accents and these sorts of things. And so it's always been something that I've been very, very excited about. And so the answer to your question is yes, love foreign languages, love foreign cultures. Even though I'm just some kid from the hills in Vermont, I enjoy the hell out of it.
So, with your ability to be, as you put it, a fish out of water, your flexibility, your curiosity, all these amazing qualities that you have, do you think these are all qualities that not only fuel your passion for being an entrepreneur, but also do you think that these are qualities that have helped you to be successful?
I would have to say that they have helped. Yes. I mean, anyone who has either started a business themselves or worked for a small outfit knows that everything's going to come crashing down all at once, at least a few times a day. And you just have, that's just how it is. And you got to be ready for the next thing. And you've got to be thinking ahead. And you've got to just be uncomfortable with not knowing. So much of entrepreneurialism is just, you don't know what the other options are. You only know what's right in front of your face. And if you have the luxury of having somebody wise who can be a mentor every once in a while, that's great. But even in my situation, I have an amazing mentor. There's still so much that's unknown. It's you just can't possibly have all the information at one time. So you're constantly operating in a state of, well, I don't like that it's working this way and it should be happening in this other way. That's culture shock essentially in a nutshell, right? And that's what we experience anytime we're in a new context, anytime we're in a new situation. And the realization that I've always had is like, number one, I probably need to adjust in some way, either my thinking, my mindset, or just the way that I'm presenting myself. And number two, I am not going to have all of the answers quickly. So I'm going to have to be uncomfortable for a while, and I need to be okay with that. And that's kind of, to me, what entrepreneurialism is about 24 hours a day. It's the constant state of challenge and discomfort and worry. But if you've, surrounded yourself with good people and you have good habits and are trying to improve yourself 1 millimeter every day, you're going to get there. It's good things are eventually going to happen, but you just have to be okay with that. It's the fact that it's not going to be okay. You know, that's how it works.
Well, I can speak just on a much smaller scale doing this show. I feel some of the things that you're saying and some of the things that you've been through because I personally, I know that curiosity really fuels it for me to do this show because one day I'll be talking to somebody from Sweden doing one particular thing. The next day is somebody from Middlebury, Vermont, who now lives in Japan, and
Mhm.
just the amazing stories. And not everything always works out. Some of the people that have
Sure.
come my way never even made it to an episode, didn't work out. Certainly don't want to call anybody out, but I mean, I really enjoy not only the opportunity to meet such amazing people, but I feel like the challenge of trying to figure it out and to, you know, really brainstorm, rack my brain for the next step, the next this, the next that. I love that part of the challenge. And because I have a full time job still, it's like, well, I don't have quite as much time to dig into it like I want to, but the
Sure.
amount of time I do have is amazing. It's not just a hobby for me. Like I really wanted to go somewhere, and I see it as a real challenge. Just I'm a very resourceful person, which you clearly are as well to get where you're at. So I that for me, I can really relate to what you're saying, and at least the path that you've tried to carve for yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you for lumping me in with all the other amazing people that you've had on the show. I am, as you said, I curious. I curiosity has nearly killed this cat a number of times, but I am the type of guy or the type of person who just loves to figure it out for himself and is not at all worried about going out on a limb on his own in order to do so. And that's essentially what I've sort of done a number of times throughout my life. Roll with the punches and just keep getting back up. And so here we are today, I guess.
So before we really get into this phase, the Japan phase of how you've built yourself up, I know that acting and being an author, there's other components of your career that you have as well in addition to this. Do they coincide with the brewing part of your career, or were they just opportunities that came your way? How'd you wind up uh, acting?
I acting was one of the first jobs I ever had actually as a kid. So I was a stage actor, a lot of musicals. I'm I'm not a great dancer, but I can fake it. I'm not a great singer, but I can fake it. And I did that forever. And I ended up in Japan and I just sought out opportunities, not so much on stage anymore, more on small screen and in movies, a lot of TV commercials and those sorts of things. So I was testing all the time, and acting is one of my great loves in life. And it turns out that, and this started when I was living in Vermont, one of my serious one of my more respected jobs, I guess, or one of the jobs that people are like, oh, that's a real job. The brewing beer, not so sure about. The real job would have been when I was a school teacher. So I've been in education since the 90s as well. And for the first, when I lived in Korea, I was doing that over here. I taught writing at a university in Tokyo for 20 years. And that only just recently stopped being a main focus of my life, only within the last, since the pandemic, really, when I jumped full-fledged face first into what I'm doing today, which is trying to spread indigenous Japanese spirits around the world. Now, what has worked out remarkably well in my favor is the fact that what I do now, as one of the founders of Honkaku Spirits, which is an import company based in New York, also one of the co-owners of a alcohol trade outfit in southern Japan called, oddly enough, New York Wine Traders, is that in my role helping to manage these two businesses, I have been able to find the fulcrum of my acting love, my educational love, and my love of small batch handmade drinks. And so this role that has come about has eventually evolved itself in my life, and then I had to jump 100% into recently, is where I get to do all of those things at the same time as the face of Honkaku Spirits, which is attempting to bring intensely artisanal spirits from southern Japan to the bar world in the United States. I lean on my performance experience. I lean on my educational experience. I lean on my production experience to bring a story to people that is very, very energetic, very passionate, and grounded in something that's going to hopefully be very memorable. And so it's something that, I guess, to put it to get back to answering your question, all three of these things have always been there side by side, but they haven't always been working in concert. Sometimes they're fighting each other. now today, I can't do what I do without all three of them. So it's come full circle. It's really I I'm incredibly fortunate in that sense.
I would ask you how you wound up putting all that together to where they coincide with each other, but I don't even know if you would even be able to answer that, although I'll give you a shot at it.
Well, I spend about 6 months of the year now. I live, my home is in Tokyo, but I spend 6 months of the year living out of two suitcases, traveling around the United States. And in my role as one of the principals at Honkaku Spirits, I'm teaming up with our distribution partners across the country to educate, to taste, to train people at all levels of stakeholder positioning throughout, from the folks who are distributing the product to the folks that are on the floor in a liquor store hand selling the product, to the bartenders, to the wait staff, to the bar managers, everybody, trying to get them in on the ground floor of something that I believe with all of my being will be a very, very large phenomenon as it finally breaks out of Japan and heads around the world. Everybody's heard of sake. It's everywhere now. It took a while, but it is everywhere now. And there's a ton of folks who are very knowledgeable about it and very passionate about it, spread across all of the continents of the planet. Now, imagine that there's a drink made in Japan that is actually more popular than that, but nobody's heard of it yet. That's what I'm working on today. We are the spirits that I work with, the spirits that our company imports, alongside a bunch of other very inspired importers in the United States and around the world. These are Japan's best kept secrets. And so when I go to the States and I am educating and I am telling stories, I'm a performer. I'm on stage. I am trying to I'm trying to make people laugh. I'm trying to make people remember. I'm trying to make people also forget. I'm pouring them alcohol, so I'm trying to get them to forget their worries. And so all of these things come together. And fortunately, because I've had all of these experiences, well, I hope that it makes me more effective.
I'm sure it does. And actually, I mean, I guess when we go to college and we take public speaking and do things like that, it's supposed to, even though we might think it's not really worth that much, I guess we're supposed to get something out of it. And obviously, you have a very different path. You've gone way beyond public speaking 101 with your life and your career. But
That's true.
I know that when I think so, I was a little bit out of the box in college, and I hadn't, other than like plays and you know grade school, I hadn't really done a whole lot of acting. But I took an acting class for a semester, and first of all, I'm not an actor at all, but I did learn something from it, and it even though you're getting the authentic me when I'm doing this show, it's still performing. I mean, I have to prepare, I have to rack my brain, I have to think on the fly, etc., etc. I can't just be like AI and just be very robotic. I have to convey something. So that kind of experience, even though I'm not an actor and probably, had didn't really like put myself on any kind of trajectory to perform in that sense. I think that kind of thing, those experiences did kind of teach me that I had something in me where I wanted to put myself out there and to see the difference between me hitting the record button and performing in this sense versus just being the regular me, even though it's still authentically me, which I don't know if that's getting all twisted up and not making sense or not, but that's kind of how I view it. So there's an element of performance even when you're speaking or just, trying to, I guess in your case, sell a product to get people excited about a product. So performing is important whether you're an actor or not.
Yeah, and everybody's a salesperson when it comes down to it. I mean, a lot of people say they don't do sales. Everybody's a storyteller. Everybody's a salesperson. And the degree to which you ham it up, the degree to which you know how to be yourself, and it's something that clearly you learned from that acting, that drama course that you took. It's just all about practice. It's all about also understanding that the people that you are in front of really want you to be good. They really are supporting you. They want you to be successful. And if you can just live in the moment and communicate with people where they are, where they're coming from, you'll end up being the most authentic version of yourself, and that's going to win fans. That's going to get people to remember you, and it's going to cause people to act on what they've learned from you. So it's, yes, everybody's a salesperson, everybody is a performer, and if you say that you're not, well, you're kidding yourself. And you need to embrace it in whatever way you can. I'm not saying that everybody has to be in front of the camera, but it's, don't be afraid to just be yourself. You know what I mean? And the best actors are the ones who can be themselves.
So before I get into how you wound up to the founder of Honkaku, I do want to talk a little bit because this conversation's making me think about myself a little bit because I know that with all of the confidence of starting this show and putting myself out there and all that stuff, doubts do creep in. I've dealt with my certainly my fair share of doubting myself and having imposter syndrome. But I've
Sure.
looked on the other side here, and you have at least, projected this like real air of confidence just, from being in high school and having these ideas and just going for it. And then just going from there to Japan, having all this success. You've had a real great life. I mean, have you ever, other than when your parents stepped in, have you ever had any like doubts or questions about whether this idea can succeed, or have you ever just struggled with imposter syndrome?
All the time, all the time. I am not immune to any of that. I, for instance, I've been uh, on the judging circuit for the last few years, last 5 years or so, international spirits competitions where I'll go to this competition and I'll sit at a table with experts from other parts of the world, and we'll blind taste a bunch of spirits and score them and have pretty intense discussions about them. And it's pretty intimidating to be thrown into these, that guy over there from France is an Armagnac expert. She's a very, very well regarded journalist who spends all of her time on the road and has tasted so many things. And it's confidence in your palate. And it's like, do I really know what I'm talking about? And so it happens all the time. And it's perfectly natural. And if you're the type of person who doesn't ever experience that, then I kind of worry about you. But I think it's perfectly natural. And so I I think where I derive a lot of my confidence from is that I, number one, I know for a fact, and I this will be true until well past the day I die. I don't know everything, and I can't know everything. I want to know everything, and I'm going to try, but I'm going to go into every situation assuming that whoever else is there with me knows more than I do, and that's a really good place to start from. And I'm sure everybody understands that intrinsically, intuitively, but that has helped me quite a lot in my life, to just, as much as vociferous, as energetic, as outgoing as I appear to be, believe it or not, I actually am quite frequently silent and absorbing, observing, learning, and waiting until the appropriate time to make at least become a part of the conversation. And I've done that for long enough and had enough positive results from it that it's basically an automatic setting whenever I'm in a new situation. And I'm just trying to learn from other people before I do anything on my own. And it's been immensely useful in business. It has gone a good way towards helping me to settle down and feel more comfortable in a lot of situations. And I am very comfortable with silence. And it may be something that I've learned from doing business in Japan for 20 years, or maybe it's just a natural part of who I am. But I'm okay with nobody saying anything, even though we're having a conversation. It makes a lot of people nervous. And I like the silence, and I like just thinking about the words. And I like thinking about the context and thinking about the relationship between the two or more people in the conversation, thinking about what everybody wants. And it's almost like acting out a scene, isn't it? Because every line in a scene, depending on which school of training you had, you're trying to affect something in the other person, or you're trying to derive something from the interaction. Like every single line is that's one way of dissecting a scene anyway.
A lot.
And so
No, after you. Sorry.
no. I think it's just, yes, I have learned a number of skills that have helped me, but no, I do not feel confident in all situations at all times. I think is the executive summary of that big meandering thing that I just said.
No, that was terrific, and I didn't mean to cut you off there, but everything that you said really. So, I feel like I always come on here and say, "Oh, this is why I love doing this, and that's why, and this is why I love talking to entrepreneurs." But you did point out something that is one of the reasons why I like doing this show so much, because I can always get that aha moment where I can see or hear something that I'm like, wow, that sounds a lot like me. I totally relate to that. Because one of the reasons I love doing this is because there's so much going on in the world that I don't have the answer to and I don't know. And this is certainly a topic that's very unique, what you specialize in, that I don't know a whole lot about. And I love that. And so I tend to be a fairly quiet person myself, but I love, and I think one of the things that hopefully makes me a decent host is that I do love to just kick back and listen and really absorb what people are saying, because what you're saying is really important to me as far as like learning not only about you, but learning about the world. And I love that about doing this show, and I feel like it's funny because the thing I majored in television production, and
Oh,
that's the thing that I know, and so I almost feel like there are so many other things that I just haven't experienced or don't know a whole lot about. So, what better way to learn than to do one of the things I know best, which is actually producing something, or at least having sufficient audio and video levels, not to start with technical talk here, but to just have that part of it good and then kick back and learn from everybody else. And
mm,
I do agree that there is a lot of power in being quiet and just, even if you're not listening to somebody and you're just being quiet on your own, there you can get a lot. It's very healing. You can really refresh yourself and your mind just by spending a day being quiet and just being.
absolutely. 110% agreed. I think it's one of the most undervalued assets in our lives, silence. So yeah, we could use it to pay our way through the day a lot more often, I feel.
Well, let me ask you to not be silent for a minute, and we'll finally go into the story of how we'll start with when you came to Japan and get to today on, how did you get here?
So I started out in education as being the way that we kept the lights on at home. And I was, as I said, went into back into university life and was ended up teaching primarily academic writing, which is uh, honestly a fancy way of saying that I was an overpaid plagiarism detective for a number of years. But it was a very rewarding career because number one, I was at a very good university. Number two, my students were phenomenal. A lot of students from international baccalaureate programs from all around the world. And number three, it's a very rewarding topic or subject to be teaching because essentially you're teaching people how to go from research question to bibliography and everything in between. And you can rather quickly see improvement on the page. It's very evident in a real hurry from draft to draft as people learn to think about things in new ways and learn to think about structure and storyline and the way that things line up and evidence and all of the other logistical aspects of putting together a formal piece of writing. And I loved it. And I especially loved interacting with the students. I didn't love all the marking. There was a ton of marking, a lot of drafts to be read through on the weekends and to give feedback on. So that nearly made me go blind, but it was something that I was very near and dear to my heart and sustained my small family for nearly 2 decades. It didn't make a lot of money. Education rarely does, but I was very time rich. I had lots of off time. It's funny how the further you get in the education, the less time you're in a classroom, right? Well, that's certainly true in Japan as well. Once you get to tertiary education, the semesters are not that long. And so I was a full-time employee of the university, but I wasn't required to be on campus as much as you would guess. And so I just had long weekends all over the place to start pursuing something that very quickly became a passion of mine, and that was Japan's indigenous spirits. Now, this is going to sound similar to another word you may have heard of, but hear me out. The main spirit of Japan, it's not whiskey. It's something that's much older, and it's called shochu, shochu. Shochu is made all across Japan. It outsells sake here in Japan. People drink more shochu than they drink sake on an annual basis. And its main center of production is down south in a large island called Kyushu. And then even further south, down, if you head out towards Taiwan, there's a ribbon of islands, a necklace of islands that culminates in the prefecture of Okinawa. Okinawa actually is where Japan's first spirits were distilled hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And it's a style that is commemorated today by the name Awamori, Awamori. And it's technically shochu's auntie. It's a couple generations older, but they're intrinsically related and connected, and tax law nearly considers them to be the same thing. But these are Japan's native spirits. And I ran into them almost by accident when I was trying to study sake. I was waiting for my wife to get off of work one evening, and she was my girlfriend at the time, but I was at a izakaya, a gastropub, normally drinking through sake. And one day, the master of the bar, the owner of the bar, pushed shochu in front of me, and oh my lord, that was the beginning of the most massive rabbit hole I have ever encountered in my life. He gave me a little tasting of he gave me, what was it? It was a barley shochu, and then a sweet potato shochu, and then a buckwheat shochu, a kokuto sugar shochu, and a rice shochu, all clear as water, also radically different in flavor profile and attack. I was blown away. I actually accused him of lying to me. I said, there is no way that all 5 of these drinks are all just called the same thing, shochu. He's like, He was taken aback. He was like, no, they're all shochu. And he told me that the main area of production was down south. And because I had free time, I got right on a plane and I flew down. I didn't speak any Japanese. That was a little bit of that was missing from my repertoire at that point. But I just started knocking on distillery doors and seeing if somebody would let me in. They wouldn't at first because I was this weirdo who had just appeared out of nowhere with no appointment or anything, speaking almost no Japanese. But I knew how to make good drinks, and so I kept flying back down occasionally. And eventually one day word got around because even though people will tell me to take a hike, I'm going to find the best local bars and izakaya to hang out in that night. And people are going to hear about me. And eventually word got back. They're like, oh, the weird American from Tokyo is back in town. Totally harmless. He just wants to see how shochu is made. And one day somebody let me in. They were like, hands in your pockets. And I was like, yeah, no problem. I won't touch anything. And I was blown away because it's so different from making beer. It's just so diametrically different. And I was just flabbergasted. I didn't understand how any of it worked. I was like, where's your kettle? Where does the malt come in? I has no malt, no kettle, no nothing. They use a fungus over here to sacrifice grains. It's just phenomenal. And it blew me away. And that was 2003. And ever since, I've just been trying to find ways to get the word out about this culture, this aspect of Japanese culinary culture. It's Japan's best kept secret. Quite honestly, it's everywhere, and nobody outside of Japan has really heard about it yet. So I kept tumbling down this rabbit hole, making friends with the families that make these drinks, helping them occasionally when they're shorthanded during the heavy part of the brewing and distilling season, and just made some really great relationships and friends to this day. And so there's a part of what I do now is simply, I'm very biased. I'm just trying to help my friends. I'm trying to help them pass this fifth generation distillery onto their kids so it can become a sixth generation distillery. But it's all these amazing families making very small batch spirits in these tiny little hamlets all across southern Japan that I fell so madly in love with that it ended up sort of taking up and increase a larger and larger amount of my energy and my time as we work through the aughts into, through the Lehman shock times. And then 2014, I published a book called the Shochu Handbook. I was knighted by the Japanese government as an official ambassador for these spirits and was traveling all over the world to try to spread the word. And then I eventually, quite honestly, started to get a little bit frustrated with the rate of uptake of people from outside of Japan really latching on to these drinks and making them their own. So in 2000, and I should know this, I don't know why I can't remember which year it was, 2018, I think, I purchased part of an alcohol distribution company in Kyushu, in Fukuoka, which is the largest city on that island. And then I suddenly had the ability to get product out of the country. I had legally had an export license. And then in 2020, this is amazing timing. Get a load of this. March 6th, 2020, I gave up my tenured position at Waseda University in downtown Tokyo and co-founded a company. It's on the wall behind me, Honkaku Spirits, which is an import company based in New York City. And man, that was a hell of a time to jump, right? But I jumped. Yeah. Said, no, I'm going to do this because I'll regret it if I don't give it a shot. And so that's what we've been doing since March 6th of 2020 is using these two companies work together as teammates to get the products ready, get the brands developed, ship them to America. The American company liaises with the distributors to get them pushed out all across the United States. And so I spent about 6 months of the year here and 6 months of the year in the United States. My next trip will be in August. And it is a fascinating ride, just filled with surprises at every turn.
It takes a lot of guts to have an international pandemic going on and to stick to your guns with your business, even though the world basically shut down for a while there. Like, how did you keep everything going? How did you keep yourself going mentally through all of that?
It was tough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was really scary for a long time, and nothing worked at the speed we needed it to work at. There was a huge logjam in terms of international shipping at that time. Anybody who's in logistics will recall that with ex- just extreme pain. But looking at the silver lining, there was some. We found it pretty quickly. It just gave us more time to think and more time to do things the way that we really wanted to do them. We had more time than we needed, so we tried to use it well. We worked harder on branding. We worked harder on planning out educational the channels we were going to use to educate our future customers, and laid the groundwork in terms of alliances and other importers and that were already in the space, and we were going to be moving into the space, and making sure that they knew that we were going to be trying to help them rather than taking market share from them. I mean, nobody's heard of these drinks before, so it wasn't like we needed to fight over territory, at least not yet. So it was a blessing in disguise of sorts, but I'm not going to lie, losing those 2 years of sales did not help. So we've been it was painful for a long time, and I wasn't always sure we were going to make it, but we kept on. For every bad bounce, we got at least half of a good bounce, and that continues to accelerate in the right direction. So I'm very positive about what I believe is coming in the near future.
And what do you see coming in the future for you, your business, and maybe potentially other ideas you might have?
Well, I see everybody in Japan talks about the two shochu booms historically that took place in this country. The first one was in the 70s, when vacuum distilled barley shochu really hit the collective conscious and it became a nationwide phenomenon. That was really put small batch distilled shochu on the map, at least domestically in Japan. And then later on, over a decade later, there was the dawning of um, way more than a decade, actually 2 decades later, there was this realization that all of this really good batch distilled product was being made down south. It's almost like when bourbon got really discovered by metropolitan areas in America, and it stopped being just like a blue collar drink in one cross section of America, and then it just became the darling all over the place. That happened to shochu as well, and that was the second boom. Where's the next boom? I think it's going to be overseas. I think what we're going to see is shochu is going to end up on enough cocktail lists over the next few years, and a couple of celebrities are going to latch onto it, and it's all of a sudden going to be the talk of the town. Now, this is not something it's not trendy, it's not a fad or anything. This has been around in Japan for 500, 600 years, and it's a massive part of Japanese gustatory culture. There is more in 2022, there was slightly more shochu and awamori produced in Japan than tequila in Mexico. It is a huge part of the economy, hiding in plain sight. Almost 68% of agave spirits were exported out of Mexico in 2022. Same year, less than 1/10 of 1% of shochu ever left Japan. It's just, we keep all the good stuff here. I'm a big part of the problem. You can see behind me, this is my home office. Like, I got a very good selection of shochu right in my home, but I am trying to be part of the solution, trying to share. And so I think we're going to see bartenders increasingly paying attention to these drinks. I mean, this is amazing, Marc. There's a trade publication called Imbibe magazine. And initially they were going to do just a 101 article on shochu and awamori, just to give people the basics. But then as they looked into it more, they were like, nah, this is so much deeper than that. The whole issue is about shochu. Isn't that
Oh,
crazy? So
yeah.
this just dropped. This is the May June issue, and has tons of great information about these drinks. But we are really just getting started. So do I know when that third boom is going to take place? Will it be 18 months from now? Will it be 6 years from now? I don't know. I don't, that crystal ball is not clear enough for me to be able to make anything out from it. But it is coming, I think. And these are amazingly high quality, diverse drinks. Shochu is, there's something there for everyone. It's a drink that can be made from 53 approved ingredients and their koji. So it's super diverse, and it can be used in so many different ways. It's almost flexible to a fault, because it means that there's no like one right way to drink it. It's got so many different ways that you can bend it. So that can make it a little bit too hard for people to get their heads around. But that's what I'm here for. I'm here to come and tell the stories and to do the trainings and the tastings, and hopefully get people in on the ground floor of this cultural phenomenon that is coming and should be a lot of fun to behold.
Well, I'll tell you what, this has been a ton of fun for me to be a part of this conversation and to hear your story and to hear all about what you're doing. I knew the minute that you wrote to me, I was like, man, this is gonna be a great conversation, and I've had a real blast hearing your story and talking to you. And before we go, why don't you
Sure.
tell us a little bit about how we can all learn more about you and how potentially we can get a hold of the product that you are making?
Thank you for that opportunity. Yes, and it's been a pleasure to join you on your show, Mark. I really appreciate it. I am very easy to track down online. One easy way to get me is via Instagram. It's just at Christopher Pellegrini. And I also have a personally branded website that's christopherpellegrini.com. I know it's long, but Christopher spelled the more boring way. Pellegrini spelled like San Pellegrino, but change the O to an I at the end. And don't put the San in there. That will send you to probably a different website. And my book, the Shochu Handbook, is available on Amazon. So that's pretty easy to track down. Now, if you're interested in trying some shochu, one thing that's kind of convenient about my company's website, honkakuspirits.com, HONKAKU spirits.com, is that for many of the, not all of the products, but many of them, there's the ability to there's a checkout button, and many of them you can buy through the website. And now it's not every location in the United States. There are 33 states that we can go through this pretty complex level of on or off premise shops, basically liquor stores all across the country, that will drop ship our products for us locally. So therefore, you can go on the website, and if you live, for instance, if you live in Florida, then you can find one of these products that you want to check out, put it in the basket, go through the process, and boom, they'll ship it directly to you. So that's a lot easier than it was even just a year ago, and should make access to Japanese best kept secrets a little bit less of a secret moving forward. But yeah, honkakuspirits.com is where you want to check that stuff out.
I'm glad you answered the question about Florida, where I could get it, because this whole episode, I'm like, boy, I really need to try it. So I am definitely going to track it down and give it a try. And I mean, do you have anything else that you want to send us away with before we go?
Well, I think one thing that I think is really valuable has been valuable for me in my life, and you've already said it. I'm just going to kind of summarize it. Is to stay curious, always be learning, always be learning. Um, turn off the TV. Don't watch TV. Don't get off of YouTube and stay out of the Instagram algorithm, and be reading and be learning and be curious. And there's always an opportunity to enhance your own life, not necessarily by making a gigantic jump, but at least by supplementing or by finding a way to weave something into the gaps in your own life. And it's funny how these things can turn into really, really life-changing things. And just be open to that, because we're not going to be here forever, and it's best that you just get the most out of it that you can. So anyways, hopefully you've taken away from Mark and I talking together today a message of positivity and of energy and of being grateful for the time we have.
I couldn't agree more with all the sentiments, although the one thing I could probably do a little more is read. So maybe eventually someday I will actually live up to that and actually read on my quiet time. But definitely, like, so it can be really great to just be quiet and to just get away from, we have so much technology staring at us now, especially those of us working 60 hours a week in front of technology. Yeah, I appreciate any time that I get to just be quiet and to meditate and, just think about life. And as far as never knowing when the next idea might come, my idea for doing this just came from blogging and from networking and doing things like that. Wasn't really looking to become a podcaster and get in front of the camera or the microphone, but
Mm-hmm.
people I met along the way planted the seeds, they encouraged, and you just never know. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole world out there just waiting for you to be inspired by it. And I certainly thank Christopher Pellegrini so much. I'm truly inspired by your story and your path. Thank you so much for taking time late in the day in Japan. And I really look forward to seeing how you continue to progress in your career. And I truly wish you all the success in the world. And based on the drive and the curiosity and the resourcefulness that you have, among many other qualities, I have no doubt that you will just continue to keep going in the direction you're going. So, Christopher
Thanks, man.
Pellegrini of Honkaku, thank you so much. He is the founder of Honkaku Spirits Botching. I'm trying to say it over and over just to get it right once, but
You got it.
I did get it. No, because I started saying Honkoku, and then I'm like, the other part of it. Oh my gosh, spirits. And I'm
No,
like, if
it's
he just,
fine.
like, I'm sitting here, like, he keeps, like, moving back and forth. He just moves a little bit. I know what the other part of it is. Honkaku Spirits, founder of Honkaku Spirits, Christopher Pellegrini. Thank you so much for being on Mark My Words. I'm Mark Schmidt, and I wish you all a really great day. I'll see you soon. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.